Hello, dear students, and welcome back to the series on modern Indian history. The 18th century, dear students, is a very fascinating period of our history. This century witnesses the slow and gradual unraveling of the great Mughal Empire. On the ruins of this once massive empire arose several different types of states. Some of these states were successor states established by Mughal governors themselves, and others were rebel states who had fought against the Mughals and carved their own separate niche. Thus far in the series, we have understood the decline of the Mughals and also seen the rise of successor states. In our last lecture, we have discussed the rise of rebel states of Marathas and Sikhs. We saw how the 18th century bears the strong stamp of Marathas who came very tantalizingly close to replacing the Mughal rule. We also saw how the doughty Sikhs fought against the Mughal state and ultimately towards the end of the century will go on to establish their own separate kingdom also. Today in the series, we continue the discussion based on this textbook, StudyIQ IAS's Modern Indian History, your one-stop solution for preparing this very crucial subject of modern India. Let's get started, guys, and see what are we going to see today. Today we are going to discuss the rise of the other states. We're going to see first the rise of the Jats amongst the rebel states, followed by others then. So let's get started and let us know a little bit more about the Jats, who will be a very significant factor in the 18th century. Have a look at the map, guys. Basically, where is the area of Jats? This is the area of Jats around Delhi-Agra region. The Jats are essentially a peasant community, a prosperous peasant community in the region of Delhi-Mathura, that area. While they are spread across different parts of, western Uttar Pradesh, northeastern Rajasthan, Haryana, some parts of Punjab, and all of those areas also. But then the concentration of Jats back then was, most strongest in Delhi-Mathura region, and that is where they will be forming their state also. Now, the Jats, being an agrarian community connected with the land, having zamindari elites amongst them, were at the forefront of leading some of the most fiercest rebellions against the Mughals in this area. They continue to rebel multiple times during the Mughal period, starting first during the Jahangir's period itself. So as early as the Jahangir's rule also, we see some rebellions being done by the Jats. Aurangzeb's period particularly saw multiple rebellions by the Jat community. Gokula was one of the foremost leaders of the Jats during this period, and later after his death, Raja Ram and Churaman were the subsequent Jat leaders whose name we must know. They later went on to establish the Bharatpur state. I'm going to show that to you on the map also shortly. The nature of the state, the Jat state, was feudal in nature because the Jats themselves being agrarian, connected with land and big, zamindars. Consequently, the nature of the state that they established was feudal in nature, and this state obviously had zamindars in very important positions. Major administrative roles, tax collection related roles, that those were assigned to zamindars who were within that extended kinship of the rulers. It also had a high incidence of tax, and according to some sources, the incidence was even higher than the Mughals. So where exactly is this state of the Jats that was established here? Now here you can see Bharatpur on the eastern fringes of Rajputana area. On the eastern fringes of it, you had the state of Bharatpur that was established by the Jats. Okay, subsequently, this state, when it declines, there will be others also that will spring up from amongst the same ecosystem, but primarily Bharatpur is the most important state. Okay, now some important personalities that we must know from amongst the Jat foremost leaders. Number one is Churaman, who actually is the first person in subsequent period, Aurangzeb's period, who will challenge the Mughal might. He established a strong fortress at Thun and challenged the might of the Mughal Empire. the Mughal rulers sent the local Subedar, who was the Rajput, chief, to take control of this situation and bring law and order again back in control. The Mughal army marched on to his fortress, and ultimately, because of the siege, he later committed suicide. He is then later succeeded by Badan Singh, who is his nephew. Badan Singh from 1722 to 56 will be the leader of the Jats. Dig, Kumbher, Ver and Bharatpur forts, the same Bharatpur that we just saw. Bharatpur forts were either established or strengthened. Complete domination of the Jats can be seen in this period from, in the regions of Agra to Mathura. So this is the area where the Jats are basically concentrated, very close to Delhi. And in fact, access of Delhi towards, southern parts of the empire went through the Jat lands. I mean, the areas where the Jats were in control. State of Bharatpur was founded by Badan Singh, therefore. Even the powerful Abdali, who invaded India multiple times, as we have seen earlier, he also had to concede and accept Badan Singh as the ruler of this state. Even he could not dislodge the Jat rule from this area. Subsequent to Badan Singh, the next ruler, important ruler, is Surajmal Jat. He is, considered as the Plato of the Jat tribe. I mean, he was the most politically wise and sagacious amongst them all. The power of Jats was consolidated under Surajmal. He compelled the Mughals to recognize him and even played a significant role in Mughal court politics. He captured Agra in 1761, although the region as such was already under the control of the Jats, but the fort per se was also taken over. He is also referred to as Jat Plato and Jat Ulysses, as a testimony of his political wisdom and sagacity. After his death, though, the state that the Jats had established slowly started to disintegrate, and after that we will not see them playing a very significant political role as such. Although the princely state is going to continue, but then the role as such will not be as prominent as it was during Maharaja Surajmal's time. During the Battle of Panipat also, initially the Jats had supported the Marathas, but because of some difference of opinion, later on that support did not continue, but initially the support was there. And subsequent to the battle also, when Marathas had suffered a big defeat, at that time, those remnants of the troops as well as non-combatants who had gone to North India to fight, they were helped by the Jats to, go back to their homeland in Deccan. So this is briefly about the Jats, guys. Now, having seen the Jats, now let us see the next important rebel state, that is those established by the Afghans. So we have seen Marathas, we have seen Sikhs, we have seen Jats amongst the rebel states. The one that remains is Afghans. So we will now see the states that were established by Afghans. But before we go ahead, a very quick and very urgent announcement for all of you. Our new batch has started from today, 11 September. It's a morning batch, guys, available in English as well as Hindi mediums. Based on your convenience, you can choose the medium of the batch. This, guys, is a one-stop solution, as I keep telling you, for all your preparation needs. We've had phenomenal response to our live batches, and because of the huge demand that we are seeing, we have launched one more batch in this month of September, so that those who have been left behind, they can take charge of their ambition, enroll for this batch and successfully prepare for UPSC 2024. All your preparation needs through live classes, hand holding through mentorship, classroom test, study material, the book that we are using for this discussion, this and several other world-class study material type books, those are also part of this entire batch. I'll very strongly recommend that if you are still in a dilemma, you take the plunge and enroll for the batch so that your preparation gets the necessary boost that it requires. You can use my code JDLive for enrolling in this batch. This will help you fetch a very handsome discount on the course fee. You will not be paying full 70,000. Instead, you will be paying just about 30,000. Well, with that, let me also tell you that in case you are wondering where you can get the PDFs of these classes, then you can join my Telegram channel, Jawwad Kazi. UPSC preparation. Using this QR code, you can reach my channel and download the notes from there. Now let us talk about the Afghan states that were established during this period. Now the Afghan people are also referred to as Pashtuns or Pakhtuns. We have to understand, guys, that the country of Afghanistan is a very diverse country. It has many different types of ethnicities, different types of people who reside in modern day Afghanistan. Now, amongst these, it's not the absolute majority, but a very sizable number of people are Pashtuns. About 45% of Afghanistan's population is comprised of the Pashtun people. Pashtun, also called as Pakhtuns, or what we in subcontinent, generally in India, Pakistan, call as Pathans. So these are people who are originally from southern and eastern parts of Afghanistan and northwestern part of Pakistan. This is the traditional area where this community, that is Pashtuns or Pakhtuns, has traditionally lived. Here are the major and famous cities: Kabul, Ghazni, and Kandahar. These are the three major cities where the Pashtuns inhabit. And by the way, this is also referred to as the scientific frontier of India. The scientific frontier of India. During ancient medieval times, when we used to see a lot of invasions coming from northwest. Fortunately, here on this side, we were secured because of Himalayas, but northwestern side was vulnerable. All the invasions came via northwest, and they used to come through here, the Khyber Pass, or somewhere over here, the Bolan Pass. Okay, these two passes were used by invaders to come. Mostly it was Khyber Pass. So if an Indian ruler had to defend India, then you had to hold this scientific frontier of Kabul, Ghazni, Kandahar. If you hold the forts of Kabul, Ghazni, Kandahar, only then you can defend the hinterlands. Because if you are posted here inside of the passes, then the enemy has already crossed over, and then you are at a disadvantage. You have to go beyond and hold this scientific frontier. During times of Ashok, during times of Akbar, we see that big Indian emperors were able to do. But for a large part of history, since we were not able to hold that, we see recurring invasions coming from the other side. Now, this is history, guys. We have to learn from history. So security of India, from that perspective, Afghanistan has always been very crucial and continues to be even today. This green shaded area is basically where this Pashtuns, Pakhtuns, or Pathan community basically are living. Afghanistan and northwestern part of Pakistan. They speak Pashto language, Pashto, as well as Dari. Okay? Pashto and Dari, these are basically sister languages of Persian, very similar to Persian, and Pashtuns are also considered as Eastern ethnic community or group, basically coming from that same stock. They are organized in the form of a tribal society. So the society, since the region is mountainous, economic opportunities are limited. Therefore, historically, we see in such regions, the organization of the society is always on tribal lines. A tribe traces descent from a common ancestor. Okay, so you will see, if you watch cricket, you might have seen that some of the players of Afghanistan team, their names end with Zai. Zai, Yusuf Zai, Stanik Zai, Purple Zai. So this word Zai, and there's a prefix before that. So that word basically means, children of. So Yusuf Zai means they trace their descent from some Yusuf who might have lived several centuries ago, and they are all descendants of that same person. That is why they often have this common suffix in their last names, much like we have in different parts of India also, like in Maharashtra, we have a lot of Kar, Ambedkar, Tendulkar, Gavaskar, Manjrekar. Okay, so giving cricket names because you would be familiar. So Afghans have this Zai in their names that shows their tribal name basically. So this is how the Afghans are basically organized. And all of this area is a mountainous area, which is often referred to as Ro. As we have seen in our earlier classes, Ro. Okay. So Rohilas and Bangash Pathans, they established two states in India in the 18th century. Now we are going to see the history of that 18th century. Two major Afghan empires before this were Lodhis and Surs. So Lodhis and Surs in the 16th century were two Afghan empires that we saw. Sur, the famous Sher Shah Sur, who achieved stupendous, achievements in a span of just about 5 years. Someday when we start our medieval India related discussions, I'll tell you about Sher Shah Sur in detail. He was also from basically the same Afghan kind of stock, Pathan stock, Lodhis and Surs. But the Sur dynasty was replaced by the Mughals. So the Afghan rule in India was replaced by Mughals, and therefore we see in initial years, decades, the relations between Mughals and Afghans were very tricky, very difficult. Okay, it took quite some time for the Mughals to get Afghans to accept their rule in India, because there were a lot of Afghan chiefs in India also. And in Afghanistan also, when Akbar goes and fights over there, he will have to face a lot of difficulty. Now, when the Lodhis were ruling in India during the time of Behlol Lodhi, many people from the Roh area or the mountain areas of that part, okay, Roh area, they came to India and they were referred to as Rohillas. Okay, Rohillas. Okay, so they were Afghans who had settled in India. Roh meaning mountainous areas. Okay, so some of these Rohillas and a tribe of Pathans called as Bangash Pathans, they carved out separate small kingdoms in the 18th century. Okay, they also helped Ahmad Shah Abdali in third battle of Panipat. When the Marathas were rising, Bajirao Peshwa had fought against the Bangash Pathans and he had inflicted several sharp defeats on them. So when Ahmad Shah Abdali comes, there is already an affinity because of common ethnic origin, and that is why in the third battle of Panipat they support Ahmad Shah Abdali. But subsequently we will see that these states will decline very soon. They'll not have a very significant role to play in the 19th century as such. Okay, this area is called as Rohil Khand area. This is where one of the states was established by the Rohillas. Let us know a little bit more about these two states. Who are the founders? Remember the names, guys. One, Dawood and Ali Muhammad Khan. Dawood and Ali Muhammad Khan had estate in the Bareilly, modern day Bareilly district of West UP. Okay, Bareilly, that area is closer to the northern border of UP, Uttar Pradesh with Uttarakhand. So from there, they were able to expand their control and created a separate small state of Rohilkhand. State of Rohilkhand. This extends from Kumaon Mountains, okay, lower Himalayas, to the river Ganges, river Ganga. So in that part, as I showed you in the map, that is where Rohilkhand existed. This is the first state, Rohilkhand. Second state established by Ahmad Khan Bangash. Bangash is the name of the tribe that he comes from. So this is second state, which is east of Delhi in modern day Farrukhabad, that area. It had influence from Farrukhabad up to Allahabad in the east and fringes of Bundelkhand in the south, okay, northern part of Bundelkhand. So in this area, the influence of the Bangash Pathan established state existed. So these were two states about which we must know. So thus far, guys, we have covered all the rebel states in this manner. Now we go to the next type of states, which were independent states, as in those states on which the Mughal control was not any significant, and then they went on to establish their own independent power. Let us start with this. The first state that we are going to see in this context is that of Mysore, the state of Mysore. The state of Mysore was ruled by Wadiyar dynasty. Remember the name? Wadiyar dynasty. The ruler being King Chikka Krishnaraj. The name of this king is not very significant. The reason being, the king was largely just a puppet ruler, and all the powers were concentrated in the hands of two ministers, Nanjaraj and Devaraj. So the king was a puppet ruler, much like what the Mughals were during this period. Similarly, in the state of Mysore also, the situation was similar. Now, earlier, this region of Mysore used to be a part of the great Vijayanagar Empire. When the Vijayanagar Empire suffers its demise after the Battle of Talikota, the Vijayanagar Empire will again start to unravel, and out of it, some principalities were born. Mysore was the most significant over there. It continued for quite some time. And this Mysore was ruled by Wadiyar ruler King Chikka Krishna Raj. Okay. In this state of Mysore was a military officer by the name Hyder Ali. Hyder Ali started out as a small soldier, a Sipahi as we would call him, but because of his stupendous achievements on the battlefield, he was a born military genius. He rose in ranks and became an officer in the same Mysore army. It is said that he was a polyglot. Who's a polyglot? A person who can speak multiple languages. He could speak Hindustani, Kannada, Marathi, Telugu, as well as Tamil, the languages that were spoken around the state of Mysore, within and around the state of Mysore. He was considered to be a brilliant administrator, an outstanding army commander. Even the Britishers accepted, that he was a military genius, and he was an enemy. He had defeated them in the first Anglo-Mysore War, made them to sign a very humiliating treaty, raided Madras, but yet even the Britishers considered that he was an outstanding army commander. A very shrewd diplomat who knew how to use diplomacy to win wars, to ensure your self-interest. A very shrewd diplomat. So we are going to see now a little bit more about this state of Mysore. Okay, on a side note, guys, let me just remind you that Anglo-Mysore Wars, Anglo-Maratha Wars, those are coming up in our subsequent sessions. As we did not cover that in Marathas, here also in Mysore, we are not going to cover Anglo-Mysore Wars. That is part of a separate discussion in expansion of British rule in India. Here we are only seeing the state as it was established. So this here, guys, on the screen is the map of the state of Mysore. You can see on the north, it has a shared border with the Marathas as well as with the Nizams. Okay. On the south, it has a border with Travancore. Earlier, this part, the Malabar coast and the Kanara coast, was not under Mysore. It was Hyder Ali who annexed it. Why did he annex it? Because Hyder Ali wanted help from the French. He wanted to modernize the army, and for that reason, he required arms, ammunitions, etc. coming from the French. And for that reason, he needed the control of the coast. And of course, for other reasons like trade and commerce. But primarily, his motive was so that the connection with the French can be established strongly. Okay. So this is the geographical, you can say, location of this particular state. Now let us see some of the steps that Hyder Ali took. In 1761, after having established himself as a successful military commander, having become very powerful in the Mysore state system, he did a coup. He got the ministers replaced and took complete control in his own hands in 1761, the same year as we see the third battle of Panipat. Okay. Geography mein, guys, history mein, everything is interconnected. The Marathas are away with the flower of their army fighting in north. They suffer a big defeat. That also gives a lot of opportunity for Hyder Ali in the next few years to expand at the cost of even Marathas. He expanded his boundaries and therefore came in conflict with Marathas as well as Nizam and East India Company. Now, East India Company on the eastern coast by this time has been able to defeat the French powers. It has been able to win Battle of Plassey. It has, it has a substantial presence now on the eastern coast. So naturally, when Hyder Ali will expand, he will also come into conflict with East India Company. Please note that. He ensured that internally, the kingdom of Mysore was compact. There was no challenge to the authority of the state. Therefore, he suppressed polygars who were traditional military chiefs in Mysore. Now, these polygars originated right from the Vijayanagar times. The state of Vijayanagar was a unique state in terms of its organization. Below the king, there were many small vassal chiefs who paid their allegiance to the king, and in return, they had a lot of internal autonomy or freedoms. Polyguards were basically residue of that structure. And these polyguards were used to having a lot of powers and autonomy. Now, this was not conducive for the state of Mysore. Why? Because the state of Mysore has to fight powerful enemies like Marathas, Nizam, and also East India Company on the other side. Okay, while fighting these enemies, Mysore requires a very strong army and complete control on the state. Polyguards, who naturally had a tendency to challenge and rebel against the state, were a danger. So Mysore state under Hyder Ali comes down very heavily on these polyguards, removes them from their traditional roles of even tax collection. These polyguards used to collect tax, keep their share, and pass on the remaining to the state. But this meant that this middleman was naturally keeping some sum for himself. The state of Mysore did not allow this. So it ends the role of polyguards. He conquered Bidnur, Sunda, and Kanara. Kanara, by the way, is here on this coast. Later, he annexed Malabar and Calicut. Malabar coast over here, and below this is Calicut. All of these areas are on the coastal side of our western coastline, and this was significant for Hyder Ali for sea lanes, and as I just mentioned to you, for communication with the French. So all of these areas were taken over. In this process, the Marathas naturally saw Hyder Ali as a threat, and under Savai Madhav Rao, after the third battle of Panipat, when the Marathas start to revive, during those times, the Marathas raided territories of Hyder Ali, and Hyder Ali had to surrender a lot of Mysorean territory, pay a lot of money also to the Marathas to buy peace from them. But once Madhav Rao Peshwa passed away, after that Hyder Ali felt strong enough and he recovered many of these areas back from the Marathas. Okay, he fought long wars with different powers, including with the British. And in the first Anglo-Mysore War, he was victorious. Second Anglo-Mysore War, for 2 years, he gave a very great fight to the Britishers, and he died of cancer in 1782, right during the second Anglo-Mysore War. I'm sorry, this should be Mysore. During the second Anglo-Mysore War, he passes away around that time. So I hope you understood the context of Hyder Ali. As I mentioned earlier, Anglo-Mysore Wars are coming up in our subsequent lectures. So here, guys, are the major places that we must know. Srirangpatnam, okay, that is the major fort of the Mysoreans, and just on the other side of the river is the capital city of Mysore. Further down south is Dindigal. Remember this place. NCERT mentions its name, so it's important for us. This is where Hyder Ali had established his arsenal and his factory of building weapons. So Dindigal is significant in that sense. So I hope you got the overview regarding Mysore during Hyder Ali's times. Hyder Ali is succeeded by his equally illustrious son Tipu Sultan, very well educated and trained as a soldier. He was an exceptionally brave and reckless kind of a fighter. He succeeds his father at a young age when Hyder Ali passed away during the course of Anglo-Mysore War, Second War. After this, he continued the struggle. The Second Anglo-Mysore War will continue under Tipu Sultan till 1784, when that entire war ended in a draw. Neither side won nor lost. So 1784 tak he will fight against EIC, and also along with that, time and again he will fight with Marathas as well as Nizam. He successfully expanded territory in many different directions, and finally the Britishers will get rid of him in the final Fourth Anglo-Mysore War. I'm consciously not getting into the discussion of these wars because that requires a completely different flow and treatment. So we are going to see that subsequently. You don't worry about that. 1799, Fourth Anglo-Mysore War. Tipu Sultan, goes down fighting in a last stand against the East India Company. He could have very well accepted submission, become a subsidiary ally, but he rather decided to fight to death, make a stand against the East India Company rather than accept the humiliation of a subsidiary alliance of a foreign power. Now let us see some of the major policies that the state of Mysore implemented. First and foremost, we have to understand something called as military fiscalism. Military fiscalism. Okay. Now, Mysore is surrounded by enemies on all the sides. You have Marathas, you have Nizam, you have East India Company. And to fight these states, the Mysorean state wanted to build up a formidable modern army. Now, this required a lot of flow of revenue. To ensure that the revenue potential of the state is optimized, the administrative system that they developed is referred to as military fiscalism. Military fiscalism. What is meant by this term? The state of Mysore removed all the intermediaries, the polygar chiefs and other chiefs, between the taxpayer Rayat and the state. All the intermediaries in between are removed, and the state is directly connected with the individual taxpayer. And using its military strength, it extracts the tax revenue from the hinterland. Okay, anybody who challenges the state, he will have to deal with the military force of the state. That is basically the idea of military fiscalism, where the state uses its military power to exploit the revenue potential to the fullest. It does not allow any intermediary to have any sort of rights in between. This is the concept or idea of military fiscalism, where the state has a direct relationship with the taxpayer. Please remember the term military fiscalism. This will be the same idea that Britishers will implement in 1805, first in Madras, called as Rayotwari settlement. Rayotwari settlement. Unlike in Bengal, where they will implement Zamindari settlement, permanent settlement with Zamindars. In South India, Munro, who had thoroughly studied the functioning of the Mysorean revenue system, implemented a similar system which is called as Rayotwari settlement. Okay, the inspiration actually is coming from here. Irrigation systems were improved because the state, remember, state wants to fight powerful enemies on all sides. For this, you require a strong army that requires a lot of flow of revenue, and for that reason, you have to optimize, get the maximum out of the revenue potential of the state. How will you do that? Agricultural productivity has to increase for that, and therefore irrigation systems were focused on so that agricultural productivity will be improved. Sericulture, okay, the art of making silk was introduced by Tipu Sultan in Mysore so that a new type of revenue can be drawn from. Ambassadors were sent to France. Now see the vision. Tipu Sultan understood that the advantage that EIC has is that it is an advanced civilization. So he sent ambassadors to France for bringing that technology, the technology in Europe to India. He built a navy for ocean trade. Now, it is not sufficient to have just trading ships, because your trading ships will always be vulnerable at the high seas. European ships, these British, Dutch, Portuguese, etc., these people can always attack your trading ships. So to protect your trading lines, you need a strong navy. So he starts to build a navy in that sense. He also established a state commercial corporation. See this point, guys. A state commercial corporation. Just like the Britishers had established a business corporation called as East India Company, the French had a state department for trading related purposes. So on similar lines, Tipu Sultan also establishes a state commercial corporation so that profit could be earned through this trade. So he understands what the Western powers are up to. Okay, unlike a lot of Indians who could not really gauge in time what the Europeans were doing, Tipu Sultan had an inkling about the strength of the Western powers, their technological advancement and their advantages in trade. So he's trying to counter that. He established trading centers in Mysore, other parts of Western India, and also overseas so that trade could be facilitated. He sent embassies. He sent embassy to the Ottomans. He sent embassy to the ruler in Oman. in capital Muscat and many other places so that trade could be facilitated and a coalition could be built against East India Company, the Britishers. He was a man of many novel ideas. He always wanted to keep on bringing and churning out new ideas. So he implemented a new calendar, a new system of coins, a new system of weights and measures, among other things. So many innovations can be seen during the times of Tipu Sultan. And the state of Mysore was one of the most formidable state when it came to its armed forces. Hyder Ali, himself a military genius, and Tipu Sultan, a doughty warrior, they invested a lot of efforts and resources into developing a powerful military. Hyder Ali himself was trained in Western military tactics, trained with French officers, so he implemented that in the entire Mysorean army. He established an arsenal at Dindigal. I showed you the place on the map. You can download the PDFs from my Telegram channel and refer to the content from there. He established a clear command structure. Okay, clear command structure. Unity of command is a very key principle in the armed forces. Without having a clear-cut command structure, it is not possible to enforce discipline in the army. So he understands that as a born soldier. So he designates clear-cut command structure. Risala was the basic unit of organization. So remember the term Risala. Okay. Even today in Indian Army, in some of the regiments, we have the term Risaldar. Okay. So originally it's a Persian term, Risala. So what is meant by Risala? Risala is a small team. So leader of a small team is referred to as Risaldar, and that team is referred to as a Risala. Hyder Ali used this terminology. Tipu Sultan built upon this foundation and enhanced the strength of his army. A board of admiralty was created. Okay, he understood the importance of navy. He created a board of admiralty. 22 battleships and 20 large frigates were built. Dockyards at Wajidabad, Molidabad and Mangalore were built for this purpose. He introduced Persian commands into the drills of the army. And very significantly, he started the system of rockets. Okay, all the rocket technology that we see today, its origin is there in India. And Tipu Sultan is the original rocket boy, guys. Okay, Tipu Sultan established a system of rockets which were used to great effect during the Anglo-Mysore Wars. In the Second Anglo-Mysore War, several British officials were captured alive because of Tipu Sultan's rockets hitting their ammunition dump. These rockets, what was the advantage of rockets? See, traditional top or big cannon guns, they are heavy to move. Rockets are lighter. Heavy cannon guns have a big recoil. You have to then again get it back in place. Rockets do not have that sort of a recoil. Rockets can be launched from ships also. The Britishers, when Tipu Sultan was finally defeated in 1799, they got hold of all the rockets, sent it to London, and there they reverse engineered it. And they then started their own rockets, which are referred to as Hargreaves rockets. Okay. These rockets were basically re-engineered rockets that Tipu Sultan had used against them. Okay. And when Tipu was fighting the Britishers, during Richard Wellesley's times, the commander of British forces, one of the commander of British forces was Sir Arthur Wellesley. During the last Anglo-Mysore War, Arthur Wellesley, he himself wrote later in his diary that it was one of the, worst battle that he had seen. He himself, got lost in the melee during the night. Arthur Wellesley is no other than Duke of Wellington, who defeated Napoleon later in 1815, Battle of Waterloo, famous Battle of Waterloo. That Arthur Wellesley had been at the receiving end of Tipu Sultan's rockets of his army. So he was indeed the Tiger of Mysore, as he is called. One interesting facet of the Mysorean state is its relations with the French. It not only had a lot of French officers in its service, because Hyder Ali himself had that affinity with the French. Many French had served under him. He maintained a correspondence with Napoleon also. Now, we have to understand a little bit of geopolitics over here of that time. Napoleon in 1799 was in Egypt. Okay. And Britain was the arch rival of France. Napoleon had a plan to come to India. Tipu Sultan had written letters to him encouraging him to come to India to fight against the East India Company. Now, that plan never fructified. Napoleon had to go back to France, and there he will become first the consul and then the emperor of France. But then Tipu Sultan was in touch with Napoleon, and he was encouraging him to come with French troops to defeat East India Company. So Tipu had that vision of, creating an international alliance against the East India Company, understanding very well their strength on the oceans. So Indians required the help of some major naval power to deal with East India Company. When the French Revolution was going on, guys, 1789 to 99 is the period of French Revolution. 1799, Napoleon will take over. Okay, so during this period, Tipu Sultan established a Jacobin club in Srirangapattam. Jacobin club. What is meant by Jacobin club? The Jacobins were the leaders of the French Revolution's most radical period. Maximilian Robespierre and his friends, who used to, communicate or meet in a club called as Jacobin Club, they together come to the leadership role in French Revolution from 1793 onwards. And their period sees the most radical decisions in the French Revolution. A lot of blood shed also, but many radical decisions were taken by Maximilian Robespierre and his Jacobins during the French Revolution. For example, during this period, Maximilian Robespierre gave universal franchise. He abolished slavery. He brought about price control so that poor people will not suffer. He de-Christianized the society and made the state truly secular. So many such radical measures were taken by the Jacobins, and Tipu Sultan also established a Jacobin club here in 1797. He became a member of the club and allowed others to call him as Citizen Tipu. The French Revolution is all about, liberty, equality, fraternity, democracy, and all of these ideals of enlightenment. It is against a system of birth-based privileges. Everybody should be equal before the law. No, ruler or aristocrats or clergy should have some special privileges. So Tipu Sultan allows himself to be called as Citizen Tipu, which of course designates or shows that he was ready to accept that position of common person. Of course, we are reading too much into it, but then even in that day and age, taking this, allowing this sort of an address is a very significant measure. He planted the tree of liberty in Srirangapattam. So these are some interesting facts regarding the French connection of the Mysore state under Tipu Sultan given in NCERT. So we must know these facts. UPSC may ask a question in prelims. Okay, fine. So thus far we have seen Mysore amongst the independent states. Now let us briefly see what the Rajputs were doing during this crucial period of our history. Fine. So here, guys, on the screen is the map of Rajputana. Okay. Now this is a map of a later period, but nevertheless the states are the same. That is why we can have some idea about where exactly the major states were. We keep on using the names of these states, but sometimes students do not look up in the maps and they are not able to really gauge where which states were located. So I'm just sharing this map briefly with you. What were the major states? So you have Bikaner, Jaisalmer, Jaipur, Marwar or Jodhpur. Capital is city Jodhpur. That's why Jodhpur also can be used in place of Marwar. Then Mewar or Udaipur. These are some of the major states. And apart from this, there were several other smaller states in within Rajputana. Okay, so in the map, in the notes, PDF notes, you will get this map. You can have a better look at which all states existed at that point of time. Now let us see what was the role that Rajputs played during this period. First, let us understand a little bit of background of the Rajputs. The Rajput society was a clan-based society. So there were some major clans, like for example, you had the Rathods, you had the Gehlots. You had such other Rajput clans who were ruling in different parts of Rajputana. These Rajputs had been under indirect rule of Mughals. Akbar had the sagacity of turning the Rajputs from sworn enemies to sword arms of the state. From sworn enemies to sword arms of the Delhi-based state. Of course, Akbar times it is Agra, but then you can understand the broader relevance. So Akbar, through diplomacy, through tact, through pressure, through wars, also converted all of the Rajput states into his sword arm, into his allies. These Rajput states were ruled indirectly by the Mughals. Rajputs accepted the Mughal suzerainty, paid an annual peshkash to the Mughal state, but in return, they had complete internal freedom. They could run the state the way they wanted to. All their perks and privileges within the state were maintained intact. So this was like a win-win situation for both. For the Mughals, without fighting many wars, without having to stretch their resources to keep control, they got almost the whole of Rajputana. And for the Rajput states also, it was convenient because by paying the annual peshkash and accepting the suzerainty of the Mughals, they were allowed to continue their rule with all the internal perks, freedoms, status, etc. Okay? The Rajputs were given very high ranks during the Mughal period. In the initial times, we also know of marital relations between Mughals and Rajputs. So they were, in a way, tied in relationship also with Mughals, especially Akbar and Jahangir. And because of the role that they played for the Mughal state, many of the Rajput chiefs had very high ranks in the Mansabdari system. When Akbar had gone to Gujarat, to win that particular area, at that time, the entire royal family was kept under the custody of his in-laws, Kachawa chief, Rajputs. So that was the kind of trust that Akbar had. Many of his key positions were manned by Rajput chiefs. It was Raja Man Singh who helped Akbar get Kabul. Then again, he was fighting for him in the eastern part of the subcontinent. Consequently, Rajputs enjoyed a very high position in the Mughal state. They were the ones who assisted the Mughals in expansion of empire in different directions. Somehow, Aurangzeb did not, understand this relationship with the Rajputs. Of course, there were many circumstances, but then he made the mistake of alienating the major ruling families amongst the Rajput. Not all, but the major ones, their relations got soured. The instigating factor was the issue of succession in Marwar. The ruler had died, and after that, the infant son had to be raised to the throne. Aurangzeb at that point of time did not allow it, and instead he wanted somebody else from that same family, but somebody else to be raised to the throne, which was not accepted by the Rajput royal family, and that led to a conflict between Mughals and the state of Marwar, which went down the spiral. Later, Mewar also supported Marwar in this struggle. Two major families, most important families of Marwar and Mewar, they were together on this issue, and that led to a long period where Mughal and Rajput relations went through a very bad patch. But while all of this was happening, while the struggle was going on, other smaller states of Rajputs, those states continued to side with Mughals. So it was not as if during Aurangzeb's time also, where relations were very strained, it was as if entire Rajput community was against the Mughals. It was some but major states who were fighting against the Mughals. Furthermore, giving it a religious color is also not appropriate because the issue was around succession. The treatment that was given, that is what led to the relations going down the drain. So this was the problem during that period. Smaller Rajput states continued to fight for Mughals. So I hope you got this, guys. Now this was the background of the Rajputs. Now let us see what is going to happen in the 18th century. As the Mughal rule started to decline, and as we see rise and emergence of different regional states, Rajputs, who in any case enjoyed tremendous internal autonomy, they also started to consolidate their position and take advantage of this decline of Mughal rule. Subsequently, as we go ahead in 18th century, we see that nobles started to play a very crucial role, and to consolidate their position, nobles wanted the support of different powerful Rajput chiefs, and this again enabled the Rajput chiefs to make the most of the political situation at hand and get some important positions like Sayyid brothers and later other nobles also awarded very important positions of subedars of different provinces to the Rajputs. At this point in 18th century, first half and second half of 18th century, there were many states amongst the Rajputs, as we saw on the map also. And that map is also not fully comprehensive. There were many other smaller states as well. So these several states, although potentially they could have tried to create a single compact union as such, but they could not do that. They were not powerful enough to challenge the Marathas or East India Company. Individually, their rule perpetuated till the British take over. But then none of these states could actually either challenge the Mughal authority or challenge the rise of Marathas or East India Company. So they continued to they continued their rule in the same manner as it was going on earlier. From earlier Mughal control, later they passed on to Maratha control and subsequently to East India Company's control. Competition amongst themselves, amongst the Rajput states, was a problem that persisted during this period also. Before the establishment of Mughal rule, during Mughal rule also, we saw conflicts amongst Rajput chiefs, and then in later period also this competition hurt them. Marathas and Afghans during this period in 18th century, when Marathas are rising, parallelly Ahmad Shah Abdali and Afghans are also rising. During this period, Rajput areas were often raided, but nevertheless, because of their strong position in their own areas, their rule continued, perpetuated right up to independence. As we see, there were a lot of princely states in this area of Rajputana. Okay. One famous personality about whom we must know from this period is Savai Jai Singh. Savai Jai Singh is the ruler of Amber from 1681 to 1743. So he is a person who has seen that transition period. He was there during the period of Aurangzeb and the subsequent decline of the Mughal Empire. He is one who has seen that entire process. Okay. A very significant noble from Amber, founder of Jaipur city. He was a great statesman, lawmaker, and a great reformer also. A great social reformer also. Now, one interesting thing that Savai Jai Singh, Maharaj Savai Jai Singh did was that he put a cap on the expenses that Rajputs made on marriages and such celebrations, because that was often the cause behind the economic hardship that families faced. So he had taken the step and measure of actually curtailing that, which is so visionary. Even if you see our times, guys, because of a lot of social media pressure, peer pressure, and all of those things, people end up spending way more than what they can afford on marriages and other ceremonies. Earlier, at least, there used to be just 1 or 2 ceremonies, but now you have 8 days, 10 days, 15 days of ceremonies going on. And that creates a pressure within the society. If somebody in the family has a similar wedding, it leads to pressure on others also. So Maharaja Savai Jai Singh, he had that idea that no, this should be curtailed so that people don't go through economic hardship. He is the founder of the city of Jaipur from his name, basically. He was a great believer in science in that day and age when India was unfortunately backward in science and technology. He was a man of science. He made the city a seat of science and art. He had great interest in different types of sciences, especially in the field of astronomy. He built up observatories at Delhi, Jaipur, Ujjain, Varanasi, and Mathura. So this is basically the Jantar Mantar that we have in Delhi, which has become now famous for organizing protest on any issues. So if you want to protest against some issue, with due permission, Jantar Mantar is the place where you can do that in a democratic manner. Astronomical observations of Savai Jai Singh were considered to be very perfect, and he compiled them in Z.K. Muhammad Shahi. So remember the term for prelims. Z.K. Muhammad Shahi is the text in which astronomical observations of Savai Jai Singh have been compiled. He also translated into Sanskrit some of the developments of the West. For example, Euclid's Elements of Geometry and Napier's work on logarithms was translated during the time of Savai Jai Singh. Goes to show how keenly interested he was in science and technology in a day and age where we were laggards in that area. Okay. Now, the last state that we are going to see amongst the regional states is that of Travancore. Travancore was one of the 4 states that Kerala had. The first being Chirakkal, Calicut, Kochi, and the last one, the most important of all, was Travancore. Now let us see on map where exactly it is located. So this is northern Travancore, central Travancore, and southern Travancore. As you can see on the map, the southern part of Kerala as such, that part was where Travancore was located, with its capital of Thiruvananthapuram. Thiruvananthapuram. Thiruvananthapuram literally means the city of Anantha, the deity whose a very famous temple is located in the city of Thiruvananthapuram. This city during British times was also referred to as Trivandrum. Okay, Trivandrum, that is another name, anglicized name of Thiruvananthapuram. Britishers, tried to anglicize many such names which they found difficult to pronounce. In 1991, the name of the city was changed back to its original name of Thiruvananthapuram. So I hope you got that, guys. Now let us get into a little bit of history of the state of Travancore. Now, why are we focusing on Travancore and not the other states in Kerala in the 18th century? Because northern part of Kerala will be annexed by Hyder Ali. We saw in that map earlier the coastal area of Calcutta, Kanara, Malabar, that were annexed by Mysorean state. What remained in Kerala was the state of Travancore, and that remained till independence. Travancore is the southernmost part of Kerala. King Martanda Varma, who ruled from 1729 to 58, brought this kingdom to prominence. He built up a modern army on western lines. During this 18th century, Indians are realizing that we are technologically and militarily backward. So we need to change. We need to build modern armies. They realize that, and many of them make attempts. Mysore did it, Marathas did it, Nizam tried it, and so did Travancore. With the help of this modern army, he was able to oust the Dutch from his area. The Dutch were also as aggressive as the British East India Company was. But their major interest was in Southeast Asia, and they had to struggle with East India Company also. That is why they could not establish their control here in India. They left India for Southeast Asia. But before they did that, they were humbled by the state of Travancore using these modern armies. He also compelled the Britishers during his time to trade on his terms. This is the period, guys, where we are seeing the rise of East India Company slowly. And during that period, not one but 2 foreign companies, European companies, were put in their place by the state of Travancore, which is a very significant achievement. Royal monopoly was maintained on trade, especially on products like spices, which were in a great demand in Europe. So he ensured that these priced products should be a monopoly of the state only to sell. Development of irrigation, transport, communication, and such other things for infrastructure were also carried out during the rule of Martanda Varma, King Martanda Varma. Now, after Martanda Varma, the next ruler who comes to throne is his successor Rama Varma, another significant ruler of this line. He was a nephew of the earlier ruler, a man of learning and knowledge. He was himself a poet, scholar, musician, actor, among other things. So a very versatile personality. He had very different shades, to his personality. A successful administrator. He resisted the attempts of Mysorean state to gobble up the state of Travancore. But in the process, he had to accept subsidiary alliance of East India Company. During his period, we see Trivandrum, old name, Thiruvananthapuram, the name that we have reverted back to original name. became center of learning and knowledge, especially famous for Sanskrit learning. So all different types of learning and knowledge were practiced in the capital city. It became a city of education and learning. All right. So guys, this concludes our discussion on a rise of regional powers. If you have found this discussion helpful, then do leave some love in the comment box below. Like this video and also share it with your fraternity of aspirants. It will help me to reach out with more students and come out with even better content in subsequent videos. Thank you very much for joining me in this session. In our next episode, we are going to see the 18th century debate. What is this 18th century debate? And after that, we will see the advent of Europeans to India. So very exciting discussion lined up for the next episode. Do join me there. Thank you very much. All the best.